Well, I think somebody who commits to going further than they're really comfortable. I'm kind of getting really tired of people making safe bets because we're facing an existential crisis. And we have to go really fast. That's why we call it a race. So a champion is somebody who commits to act now and gets out of their comfort zone. So they get to the edge of where they're comfortable and they take one more step. Our belief in ourselves, our ability to imagine that we can do things differently, radically differently. We find it very difficult to imagine that the future could be very different from the past. I think it's a failure of imagination that has us either decide that it's too late, we failed, or it's impossible to transform as fast as we need to. I have huge faith in the innovative capability of humans when we decide to do extraordinary things. So it's failure of imagination is the biggest. Well, I reject the idea that this is about being environmentally friendly. I think that's very sort of 1990s framing. This is not about being environmentally friendly. Front and center, this is about survival and thriving as a business. This is an inevitable change. If you don't embrace it, you're just going to lose, because you'll suddenly find that all your competitors are running away from you so fast that you can't catch up. Yes, the consequence at the end will be that we're not destroying the environment that we rely on. So the consequence will be environmental friendliness. But if you're thinking of this as whether or not to do something environmentally friendly, you've already lost because you're framing it wrong. Well, unpredictably, our experience has been that throughout the pandemic, actually, people have, rather than being distracted and forgetting about climate change, perhaps because COVID has really made us realize how interconnected everything is, how fragile our lives and our systems are. What we've actually seen is businesses, investors, cities, schools, governments, all stepping up on climate change. So I think the long-term impact on climate change is going to be that COVID has actually helped really accelerate people's awareness of the need to take radical action, and perhaps our belief that we can do things very quickly when we really treat things like an emergency. In the short term, of course, it's meant a reduction in emissions, but it hasn't really changed the economic pattern. So lots of those are going to bounce back quickly. So it's really what we do in the next 5 years that will tell us whether we've learned the lessons from COVID or not. Well, politics is huge because ultimately politicians set the rules of the game, and although private sector can innovate and mayors can innovate and they can all lead, the overall pace of change will be dictated by policymakers. So it's huge, their role. What they can do is, I think, a couple of things. One, bring constituencies with them, so bring voters and businesses with them, because policy will not go faster than markets and voters. So keep making the case that this is in our long-term interest, that it will be creating jobs, that it will be improving health. There's so many reasons why we have to do that. And then set the clear long-term policies. That's something that makes it, again, in terms of this adaptation process, if it's very clear what we're going to do over 10, 15, 20 years, then it makes it much easier for us all to manage that adaptation and that innovation over time, with very clear short-term policies. But I would say end dates like the date that will burn the last lump of coal in the UK in 2024, very helpful. The date that will sell the last internal combustion engine in 2030, very helpful to set those end dates, because then people can organise their lives around